I want to ask you, how superstitious are you?
That's a good question. Well, I don't throw salt over my shoulder when I spill it.
But do you believe in like these sort of turns of event? I asked this because last night this idea, everybody said it was my fault that the plane...
Oh no, that the plane was delayed?
The plane was delayed because we were delayed, and then when I took up the option of leaving, they said, oh, the pilot immediately came and said, oh, we're leaving in 20 minutes. And I came back on, and then somebody said, when I came back on and sat down, they said, oh no, we just got another call, it's 2 hours. And everybody said, go back out. If you leave, we'll take off. And by God, I walked out the door, and they took off in like 20 minutes.
Oh, really?
And we were all joking about that. I said, yes, indeed, the universe revolves around my schedule. But there is this weird, there was this consent, they were joking, but only partially. There was this sort of weird, you know, in the area where I was seated, a consensus that it was about me either going or leaving. And then you could, the guy next to me who was from Australia seemed to imply that there was something fatal about my decision, that either one plane would go down, either this plane would go down or the plane that I was taking.
Interesting.
I mean, you know, I think it comes from literature and movies.
There's that great scene in a Maxine Hong Kingston story, I want to say it's from Woman Warrior, where the two sisters are being reunited. One has lived in California and one has been in China, and comes over, and the sister in California is concentrating the entire day to mentally keep the plane in the air as it comes from China.
That's what my husband
sort of
does.
like focusing, you know, sort of do it. And her kids or grandkids are like, what are you doing? It's untranslatable, sort of this idea that she's responsible for her sister again. I haven't seen each other in like 30 or 40 years, something like that. I don't think I'm superstitious in the sense that I worry necessarily if something happens, like I've now damaged fate. If I were to break a mirror, I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. If I were to throw a black cat under a ladder, I wouldn't be upset by that. I understand that I'm combining those two
If you
things.
threw a black
cat under a ladder,
I
and
would
then-
be upset.
Yeah, and then use that ladder to break a mirror, something like that. What else could I do? I don't know. But I do see sort of a pleasure in like seeing the world in a steaming mass of entrails that you can pull out of, you know, some roadkill, or throwing the arrow sticks,
Right.
or looking at tea leaves. But I think you see those patterns if you want to see those patterns, and I do want to see those patterns.
Can I ask you why you want to see the patterns?
Well, I think that goes to literature again. It's sort of a
Right.
love of the type of literature that we write, an experimental and innovative practice that makes connections that aren't merely communicative connections, right? That aren't simply language used in a way to get across an idea, or language used in a way to deploy conventional metaphors, which is what most kind of boring realism is,
Right.
right? I'm so cold, it's like I'm in an igloo or something. You know,
Right. Will you give me an
better
example
things,
in your own
yeah.
work of that now?
Well, yeah, and there's a piece that I have on, let me think where this at. It's at English Studies Forum, which is a magazine out of Ball State University, from a novel that I wrote that hasn't been published called Dis, which will be published by Blaze Vox.
D-I-S?
D-I-S, like a city in hell, Dis.
Right.
Or You're Getting
Or
Dissed,
You're
right?
Getting Dissed.
And Blaze Vox is going to publish it, Blaze Vox in Buffalo in some form. And it's about a guy who's in a virtual reality system, testing it out in 2007. I wrote this 10 years ago. But the landscape is sort of Kublai Khan era Asia and China. So he goes across Asia, which is sort of the future and the past at the same time, to get Kublai Khan's DNA, to extract Kublai Khan's DNA. And he visits all these fantastic cities, much like Marco Polo visited these fantastic
Right.
cities. And one city he visits I call Triptych, which is a cartographic city where everything that happens is a pattern for something else that happens. So for instance, you know, if someone were to look at intestines, that might design Lake Forest College, where we are now, or vice versa. But everything that happens, the way that you walk on a path, precipitates the unfolding of a different structure elsewhere, or maybe that structure precipitates
You mean a
the way.
physical structure?
Yeah, a physical structure. So that,
interesting.
and mental structures and metaphorical structures. And so the whole thing kind of degenerates from there, and it's all about kind of the way the language is structured according to that same method. And so every role of the I Ching, you know, in Byzantium is founded, but in the founding of Byzantium is the role of the I Ching at the same time. So everything is kind of circular. It has kind of Borges feel to it
Right.
at the same time. And so I see
Which
those
is about
patterns.
interconnections, which
Yeah.
is what I'm interested in, the
Right.
interconnections of...
I think of that Borges parable about the king who wants to make an accurate map of the country. You know this one? And the most accurate map you can make is the one that you lay directly on top of everything to scale. That's
Right.
the only accurate map
Right,
there is.
exactly.
Right, and so I'm interested in sort of not, you know, to borrow something from theory here, not making a tracing of something, because a tracing is already a falsified representation, but making these types of imaginative maps where you're going to have maybe dragons in the ocean today, or you're going to have the floor plan of Byzantium coming from the entrails of a sheep tomorrow. Everything is sort of fungible and changeable, and it happens at the linguistic level rather than the level of sort of merely communicative plot point or merely communicative metaphor. You know, the words are words on a page, as they are for the minimalist painters. The paint on the can is the paint on the canvas. I'm
Right.
interested in the material, in the way that you and someone like Steve Thomas Sewell are interested in the material as well.
I think what's interesting about this is that this is something I've been thinking about, is that the physical creative ability of the writer
Mhm.
to put something into the world, and I don't mean just in terms of books or
Yeah.
whatever, I mean in terms of once you put an idea into the mind of a reader or a listener or whomever, it is a reality in their life as much as this carpet, or maybe in some ways more so. I mean, I think some of the most intensely emotional experiences in my life have to do with literature. Some of the, and I don't mean just in terms of what I'm saying on plot and stuff, but language is so exalting. It has
Yeah.
the ability to change one dramatically in terms of reading patterns and tea leaves, for
Yeah.
example, but the tea leaves in your life. And I think what you're talking about in terms of the metaphor becoming, I think, really becomes the map on the world. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
I mean, these are, you're talking about, well, this is the piece that you wrote, right? And
Yeah, what I'm thinking of...
how long,
sorry.
just quickly,
How-
describe it. What is it? How long is it? And
It's about 50 pages. And
Okay,
it's
so
a longer,
it's a long
yeah, it's
story.
like 10,000 words. And it's meant to be a sort of one of these many series of various cities that this guy
okay,
visits.
and the name of it again is?
Triptych.
Triptych, okay.
But
and
I think,
that's
I think actually the story in published form is called it's got some crazy title. It's like the ungrammatical something of unabashed sentence words. You know, you can find it at English Studies Forum. That's the place to look, and I don't even remember the title.
That's
You can
great.
see how these go. Where I guess I sort of agree with you, and maybe I don't think I would differ with you because I've read your work. But where I'm not like a magic realist is I'm not interested in making these connections and then giving the reader a sort of sense like, oh, I now see the world differently because of this literature, and that's been an enlightening and a magical experience. I want you to say, oh, I now see the world differently, and I see it as one of many possible narratives that I might construct.
Right.
And this is fake, this is falsified,
Right.
this is art, this is manipulative, this is artifice. I don't want you to get lost in the romance of a book as you might like in a Salman Rushdie novel, which begins to work the same way, something like Midnight's Children, or Satanic Verses. You get sucked into the narrative, and you see all these connections, or Toni Morrison, they foment, they grow, and then you feel satisfied with that. I guess I want you, when you're done reading my work, to feel unsatisfied, to feel like this particular narrative may be interesting, but it's tentative, it's, it could easily be deployed, or it could be dropped. You could glom onto it for a while, but I don't want you to make the mistake of thinking that I've given you a gift. The only gift my fiction wishes to impart is the fact that what you believe is probably a sort of tentative belief to begin with.
You mean it, but are you talking about also in life in general?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Don't you think that every day we create meaning?
I do, but I guess I'd like to say that I try really hard not to take any of that meaning so far as to stop seeing other possible meanings. Now,
Exactly.
I'm in love, I have a daughter who I love, I mean, I certainly believe in certain ideas, but those ideas change.